Hi, I'm Kate Livie, the Director of Education and the Associate Curator here at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, and I'm excited to welcome you back to another installment of Chesapeake Treasure, a feature here on Facebook where weekly we explore one of the 3,800 objects from our museum collection. So today we are in the Broadreach exhibition, and I wanted to share with you one of my favorite objects here, which is a fire axe in perfect condition from the City of Baltimore. The City of Baltimore was a steamboat that was part of the Old Bay Line, taking passengers from Baltimore to Norfolk on overnight trips. And the Old Bay Line was one of many steamboat lines in the early 20th century that helped to transport passengers and cargoes throughout the Chesapeake Bay. Now, this particular vessel on July 31st, 1937, had 40 passengers on board that were escaping the oppressive humidity of Baltimore and headed out into the bay around 6:30 p.m. for an evening cruise. They had dressed for dinner, they were getting ready to go into the stateroom and sit down to a full repast of panned white trout and apples. However, unbeknownst to the passengers who were enjoying their drinks and dinner in the dining room, a fire had broken out on board, and this fire was just raging below decks. So while the passengers were eating, some of the crew members who were working on board proceeded to attempt to put the fire out with their onboard fire suppression system. So they got the fire hoses, they got ready to go, they cranked the water on, they were holding the ends of the hoses, and nothing. The fire suppression system was not working. So at that point, the captain knew that things had really turned for the worst. As they were steaming out past the 7-foot Knoll Lighthouse down the Potomac, he tried to steer into land to try to get the passengers and the crew to safety. He got stuck on a sandbar, and so the boat is dislodged, the propellers are just spinning, and the fire is just spreading at this point. Passengers are storming out of the dining hall, leaving their berths, heading towards the decks, looking over the edge of the water. The first two people or person and pet to go overboard was a passenger and her Irish setter Judy. The steamboat was made out of steel, and the hull had gotten so hot that poor Judy's pads on her paws were starting to blister. So her owner pushed her over the side, and the rest of the passengers said later that once they saw Judy go overboard, they felt brave enough to jump overboard themselves. So at that point, many of the passengers started jumping overboard, loosening their hands from the steel cables on board that they'd been clinging to with blisters and jumping into the water. Now, fortunately, that evening, the Patapsco was full of pleasure craft. It was a hot evening on the river, and a lot of people had escaped Baltimore and some of the surrounding areas on small watercraft and pleasure boats. And as the people on shore saw this boat erupt into flames, many of these smaller vessels began to go to the aid of the City of Baltimore. And in fact, people on shore who liked to enjoy in summer evenings a night out on the porch watching the steamboats leave out of Baltimore noticed this brightening light on the horizon, which one onlooker likened to the light of an early moon. And as it got bigger and bigger, they realized it wasn't a moon, it was really the City of Baltimore just absolutely engulfed in an inferno. So the City of Baltimore ended up, as you can see in this image here, it was just absolute and complete devastation. But fortunately, most people managed to get out alive. Only 4 people on board perished in the fire. And later, the City of Baltimore would go on to be held up as the example as Congress considered passing legislation to put fire suppression systems on board ships to make ships much more safe. So those people did not die for nothing. But I love here that we've got the City of Baltimore fire axe in perfect condition, indicating that it was never used to quell the flames. How it ended up and what stories it has to tell, we don't know. But we do know that the City of Baltimore was just one of many accidents or fires that broke out on steamboats in this period, and later would lead to safety precautions amongst steamboats and other large passenger carrying vessels in the Chesapeake. So that's just one of the stories about one of the things in our collections here at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. I hope you've enjoyed joining us again for another episode of Chesapeake Treasure. Check back with us next week for another object and another story. Have a great afternoon.